All right, great. Thanks everybody for joining. For me, it is still morning here in San Francisco. I'm coming to you live from my home office in San Francisco, where Clockwise is based. And the webinar we have today should be a fantastic one. We actually presented this live at Collision Conf not too long ago to a live audience, which is really fun, but it doesn't allow to get such a wide variety of attendees. So thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to talk this morning about a topic that I know is likely on many of our minds, which is how to grow in a volatile economy. How can we do more with people, the resources, the budget that we have? And before we dive into the content, quick introduction. Who am I? I am Matt Martin. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Clockwise. And Clockwise is a time orchestration platform that helps give you and your teams more time to deliver impact. We rearrange schedules to create more time for heads down work, to allow your teams to be more productive and higher morale at the same time. And we do this at some of the best companies on the face of the planet, 15,000 plus companies where we've delivered over 4 million hours of focus time automatically on a daily basis. But enough about me. Let's dive into the content here. And it starts with a very obvious statement at this point. The market is changing. And it's not just that the market has changed, which is true. It is that it is changing out from underneath us all the time. Feels like every day brings a new headline, whether it's the S&P 500 dropping another few points, or a company going out of business, or layoffs, or hiring pauses. It is very volatile out there, and it can be hard to orient ourselves as members of teams, as leaders of teams. And what is required of us is to not just adapt, but adapt quickly. Whether you're in a business that has tons of runway, tons of capital in the bank, or maybe in a business that's completely profitable, or if you're looking at, we got to change trajectory fast in order to be able to survive, all of us are thinking about the context that we need to adapt to. And one of the things that I want to note here, this is a slide from a deck that Sequoia Capital distributed. And the premise of this slide is obvious, which is that if you don't adapt quickly, you can end in a death spiral where you have to cut costs continuously because you didn't move fast enough to set a new baseline for the company. Now, obviously, you want to be company B, not company A. But I think that this also paints a picture of the conversations that are happening inside of so many companies in the tech ecosystem, but also the broader economy. And those conversations, again, whether we're profitable or whether we're bootstrapped or whether we only have so much runway, it changes the environment we're operating in, because every company B out there, every company that's running the blue line, they're reducing budgets, they're freezing hiring, sometimes reducing headcount, and those have impacts on how we sell our software and how we have to run our businesses. And so how do we adapt to win? Well, from a business standpoint, and this is also in the Sequoia deck, which is a fantastic deck, you should really focus on three main areas: initiatives that drive revenue, save money, or reduce risk. If it's not one of those three things, you should think seriously about whether you need to do it or whether you need to fund it. Really cutting back to focus on those efforts that drive core outcomes for the business. But there are a lot of resources on adapting business strategy, on adapting your financial strategy, your operating plan. So we're not going to focus there today. We're going to focus on how you lead. How do you lead your team in order to thrive in this environment? And for that, I think about it as being parallel to these three areas. So first, we want to align our strategy and our team. Make sure that the team understands the strategy and that they know how to execute on it. Two, we want to turn wasted time into priority time. And third, we need to think about, as leaders of teams, members of teams, how do we make work a sustainable environment, even under these conditions? So let's dive into each area. And by the way, quick plug, in the chat, there is a link to a slides app where you can add questions for Q&A. We're going to be reserving time at the end to have a discussion. So please drop those questions in as you think of them, and we'll be happy to review them together at the end. So first, aligning strategy and team. Now, I want to take you through an anecdote about what we did at Clockwise. So now this is about a month and a half, 2 months ago, when all of this started to hit, when we're seeing volatility in the markets and reflecting on what we need to do as a team. The leadership team came together. We reset strategy. We worked through budgets, tried to cut some fat. We looked at our hiring plan and weaned it down to what's really critical right now. And we gave a presentation. I gave a presentation to the entire Clockwise team, setting forth our strategy, what's changed, how we need to operate. But what's important is that we didn't stop there. The worst outcome from that presentation would be if everybody in the company woke up the following day and continued to do what they were already doing. There's default momentum inside of our companies, inside of our teams, and you need to think critically about how to realign your team. So what we did, and you can choose your own method, but what we did is we woke up the next day and we had a brainstorm with everybody in the company. We split up into teams addressing 6 key areas of the business. They might be different for your business, but some of them probably look similar. How are we going to adapt our sales pitch? How are we going to change how we're running customer success calls? How are we going to adapt our product strategy to really drive home that Clockwise is a cost-saving tool? Key areas of the business that allowed the team to engage, to get in a room together for a few hours, test out, what are some hypotheses that we have about how the business will change and how do we need to adapt? And there are 2 goals for this. One is we have great people inside the company, and I'm sure you do too. So pulling those ideas out, getting them on the table, generating great ideas that we can run with. But the second goal, and I think it's more important, is getting the thought and engagement of the team. Again, we don't want to go back to business as usual. We want people to think critically about what can they do at a tactical level to operate in this environment. And the brainstorm is a great way to do that. But you can't stop there. You have to repeat again and again what the change strategy is, what the change conditions are, and then give the team the space and autonomy to run at it. Now, there's a extreme example of this repetition, but I love it for its being a little bit over the top. So let's take a peek.
Yeah, it works really well.
Sorry, everyone. I'm seeing that the sound isn't working on this. Knowing the difficulty of troubleshooting Zooms live, I'll just explain what's going on instead of trying to fix the sound right now. I will share the link to, well, yeah, we'll send it out in a follow-up. The point is that this is the Walmart cheer. And so as you saw everybody fist pumping, I won't try to recreate it, but they chant out, give me a W, give me an A, give me an L. They actually still have the squiggly from the old logo because it's a decades old cheer. And they end with, what's our focus? The customer. And they do this at the start of every meeting across all Walmart. At shift changes, they do this cheer. Millions of workers across the US recite this on a daily basis. They've been doing it for decades. Now, if you could hear the audio, it does go a little bit in the direction of maybe a little bit cringy, but it is an example of just the importance of aligning the company through ritual. That repetition, pushing it into the culture through a shared moment on a repeated basis. And that, I think, is done incredibly well here. There's no doubt that every employee in Walmart has this point of connection and has an understanding of where the priorities of the companies lie, which is with the customer. So looking at this from a 30,000-foot view, just very high level. If you think about this as a 4-up grid, you really want to be in the top right quadrant, in case that isn't obvious. But it emphasizes something that I think can be not obvious in our day-to-day, which is that it's not enough to be aligned on what the strategy is. You also have to be focused on how to deliver on that strategy. And doing just one or the other, being just focused or just aligned, isn't sufficient. So I would encourage everybody to think about your team, your company, the people around you, and really think critically, how well do people around me understand what the strategy of the business is? And how much are we focusing on the things that are really high leverage to impact that strategy? If you are doing both well, you're in a great spot. But most of us, there's areas of improvement. There always are. And if you're not focused, but you're aligned, you're going to be spread too thin. You're going to be doing too much. You're not going to be delivering the impact. If you're focused and not aligned, you can be doing really focused, targeted things, but they're not going to make an impact on the strategy, and they're going to be barking up the wrong tree. So aligning strategy and teams is probably the most important thing that you can do to deliver impact inside your business with the people that you have and the resource that you have. But number two gets in a little bit more into the block and tackling of time management. Now, obviously something we think very deeply about at Clockwise. And this centers on turning wasted time into priority time. Now, I want to start with a model of thinking about two big buckets of work inside your organization. There's a lot of nuance here other than just deep and shallow, but I think it's a good construct to think about the different balance of how you're spending your time and how your team spend your time. So on one side, there's shallow work, and shallow is a little bit pejorative, but this is important work. It's triaging emails, it's replying to Slack messages, it's making sure that you're sending people the right docs, it's reprioritizing your to-do list. It's the stuff that needs to be done. It's often process oriented. It might be meetings. It's about unblocking other people. It's about continuing the flow of the business. It's important, but it's also not the stuff that's going to drive and push the business forward. It's needed to continue forward, but new ideas do not come out of shallow work. New huge impact does not come out of shallow work. For that, you need deep work. You need time for yourself or your team to really have a block where you can go deep on an area, on a strategy, on a task, whether it's a really tricky bug, whether it's a new design, or whether it's a new blog post that you're putting up. That style of work requires focus and attention because you're juggling state. You have a lot of different concepts in your head. You have a lot of different information in your head, and it's really easy to get knocked off that and lose context. And thinking about these two different buckets of work, it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's about a balance. And it's about a balance depending on your role. If you're an individual contributor software engineer, you basically can't have enough deep work time because that's where you get your job done. If you're a director who's trying to help guide a whole department, you're going to spend a lot of time in shallow work, but you still need some deep work to be proactive, to think about where the team needs to head. And if that's not convincing enough, the other reality is that employees feel that they can generate more impact and more revenue when they have this deep work time. It's almost a universal truth. The other thing that is really interesting here is that it can be difficult to get deep work time depending on your role, but it becomes even more difficult as the company grows. So inside a company with less than 250 people, the average, and this is, by the way, forthcoming research study that we conducted with tons of knowledge workers across the USA. In small companies, the average amount of time that they had for deep work was about 21 hours. Go up to companies that have over 1,000 people, that dips down to around 16 hours, 5-hour reduction weekly. And now, mathematically, 5 hours, maybe it sounds like a lot, maybe it doesn't, but you think about that, you think about the amount of time that is to deliver for impact, and then you multiply that out across the entire year. It is hundreds of hours for each individual. It's thousands of hours for your team. It is the difference between winning a market and losing. And so thinking critically about how you can get more time for deep work for those who need it is essential to making use of what we have today. Now, at Clockwise, we think deeply about this. We've developed software that helps take all those different priorities across your team, all the different preferences, and helps move meetings automatically to deliver more time for that deep focused work. I would encourage you all to use it. Get clockwise.com. It's free. Obviously, I'm biased, but there are also ways to do this manually. And just as important, Clockwise or other pieces of software, they will help optimize, but there's a lot that you can do just with a calendar. So first is think about time boxing your schedule. Now, I'm sure many of you have read articles about time boxing. I'm sure many of you practice time boxing, but the basics of it are quite simple. Take a Sunday, take a Monday morning, Friday afternoon, whatever it is, look forward to the next week and try to block out time for your priority work. It can be at the task level, but I would encourage people to just do it at the project level. Like, hey, I really need time to go deep on this slide deck and actually knock it out. And if you don't have any of those larger blocks of focus time, try to move the meetings out of the way or decline attendance. Because if you look at your week and you don't have any time to do what you need to do, guess what? It's not going to get done. The next, and very paired with time boxing, is a realistic prioritization. And realistic here to me means focused. We have a habit at Clockwise on our leadership team. Everybody sends out an email, either Sunday or Monday morning, and it lists what are the top priorities for that leader for that week. And the list can't be long. It's not your task list. It shouldn't be granular. It's 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. You're kind of stretching it there of what are the top priorities. And then the next week, you circulate an email saying, how did you do on those priorities? And what are your priorities for the next week? And it just helps focus in on what are the things that I'm trying to drive that week. It develops a practice and a habit. It also is a great communication method for other leaders. But the point is that you really need to focus on what are your top priorities, listing those out, and making sure that you have the time for them. Last, but also critically, minimize distraction. So you have time blocked off. You know what the priority is. You get into that focus time and you get sucked into an email thread. You get sucked into a Slack thread. These are simple solutions, but they take discipline. Quit email, quit Slack, put your computer into focus mode. If you have a Mac, you can even do it by the block of time. Windows has similar features. Take your phone out, put it face down on the counter, whatever you need to do in order to focus on that time. I also encourage, I think there's a great trick, is get a pen, piece of paper, make it physical so that you don't have to switch apps to do this, but get a pen, piece of paper. And as you have those thoughts, and you will have them as you're in your focus time block of, oh, shoot, I forgot to reply to Jenny for this content. Write it down on your list of paper. You can do it at the end. You don't need to do it right now, but it's going to drive you nuts if you're thinking, oh, I need to remember that. I need to remember that. Write it down, get it out of your head, keep going. I would emphasize that all of this takes practice. It's a deviation for how we work, especially the distraction minimization. We live in notifications. So give it time, give it a practice, set some realistic goals for yourself, and you can help move that waste of time into priority time. All right, last of our 1, 2, 3, making work sustainable. I think people can often jump to the conclusion that doing more with less means cracking the whip. It means trying to squeeze more out of the team. And I have to tell you, that is not a winning strategy. And to make that clear, also from one of our reports on how to build a happy and productive team is this graph. And I love this graph because the correlation just couldn't be clearer. So we asked workers if they feel that their work environment is sustainable. Very sustainable, somewhat sustainable, neither, somewhat unsustainable, very unsustainable. We also asked them, how likely are they to leave their company? So these are subjective responses, but they're from the same person. And as sustainability goes down, likely to leave the company goes up. Clear as night and day. If it's less sustainable, the risk of losing your people is higher. So how do you build a sustainable work culture? What does that even mean? And sustainability doesn't mean, I have good news here, sustainability doesn't mean you have a 4-day work week or you take August off to tour. It doesn't have to mean letting up. It doesn't have to mean letting up on the gas. It can mean that if that's right for your culture, but it's not equated with just being relaxed. What it's really about is helping to focus people to deliver high impact in a way that's rewarded and that they feel they have opportunity for growth. So on the workload side, if you're a manager, if you're a team leader, this is really critical. If you're somebody who's a member of a team, it's really critical to have this conversation. does the workload you have feel like it's focused on areas of high impact? Now, you could have two employees working the exact same set of hours. And if one is working on stuff that they feel like is busy work or not being appreciated or is not something that actually is delivering for the business or not aligned to our team's goals, and the other person feels like they're laser focused on things that's going to move the business forward, that the team's going to care about, that latter person will feel like work is way more sustainable than that former person. It doesn't have to be about the hours worked. And in fact, if that second person is focused, if they feel like they're delivering high impact, they might even work more hours. I'm not encouraging that necessarily, but I'm just emphasizing that that is the index that you have to think about. It's not just about hours worked, it's about the quality of the time worked. And if the person sees that their work is focused on areas of impact for the business. The second here is reward. And reward often has connotations of salary, bonus, stock, and those are important. I want to stress you cannot get away from that. You have to, base your compensation policies in reality and make sure that people understand your compensation policies. However, setting that aside, reward is really about making sure that people feel like their work is valued. And there's a great study here that showed that people really pick up on critical feedback more than they pick up on rewards. And I know that we probably all experienced this. You get your review, you get your 360, you immediately go to, okay, what's the critical feedback? Like, it's nice that people said nice things, but let's go to the critical feedback. And the result of that is that as a manager, as a teammate, you really have to praise about 10 times as much as you provide critical feedback for it to be felt. And I want to emphasize that it does not mean pulling the punches on critical feedback. So essential for a well-run organization. It means being really thoughtful about those times and opportunities that you have to praise. And it can be little things. You see somebody who writes a really great sentence, a really great one-liner in a piece of copy in the product. Send them a note in Slack, say like, that was awesome. Or you see somebody who went out of their way to make a new employee's experience for the day. Send them an email just saying, hey, I saw that, it was really great of you to do that. It can be small things. The larger things, large projects, of course, you want to put those on a pedestal, get the public praise, make sure people feel rewarded, but just getting in the practice of making sure that you're pinging people to say you appreciate them. And if people feel recognized for their contribution, they feel, the graph couldn't be clearer, feel that their workplace is much more sustainable because they feel that connectivity. They feel like they're being rewarded for the work that they're doing, for the hard work that they're doing on behalf of the company and the rest of the team. Last is opportunity. And this can mean promotion. It can mean helping people understand what their career path is, but it's also about giving people tactical areas where they can improve. Small skills that they can have the opportunity to grow. And at the end of the day, if employees feel like they're in an environment where they're allowed to grow, where their careers are allowed to progress, it's going to create for a more sustainable work environment. So, as a recap, align your team and strategy, turn wasted time into priority time, and make work sustainable. And under sustainable work, we want to think about workload, reward, and opportunity. If you can do these three things, your team becomes unstoppable. Now, it has to be aligned towards good business strategy. It has to be given the right resources inside the context. But this is how you adapt your team, your leadership style, in order to win in this environment.